Shauna Game is a certified financial planner, a financial trauma specialist, and the author of the new book, Unraveling Your Relationship with Money, which blends memoir and research to help women ditch shame, heal their money story, and rebuild their lives from the inside out. Shauna is changing the way we talk about money, not in the here's your budget, good luck kind of way, but in the who are you underneath your money story. Hi, Shauna.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here.
I'm so grateful that you're here, and I'm just gonna clue the listeners in. I had a migraine last week. This has been one of those weeks, and obviously my listeners know me pretty well. Astrologically, it was a wild week last week, and I was very impacted by that.
What's your sign?
Well, I'm a Cancer sun,
So am
Pisces moon. Are you a Cancer?
Yes, I am.
Oh my gosh, and
And I'm a
Taurus rising.
Pisces moon. Oh,
Stop.
yes.
Okay, well, this just makes it all make so much more sense. At least I know you can understand me because
Yes.
those waves last week were wild. And then as I was getting ready for this morning's podcast, I was listening to some other stuff. It sounds like we're in for another ride this week. So November is
Right.
off to a great start, but we are recording super early in the morning. And my listeners also know I am never super aware or alert in the mornings. So forewarning everyone, it is early and we'll see what happens. But I'm super excited to talk about this with you. I love the way you reframe money, like just in general. And we'll want to talk about all the trauma that can be related to money because I don't think a lot of people talk about that. But when we start, I always like to give the listeners a little backstory on people and how did you get here and those kind of pieces to that story. So, how did you get to the place where you're writing books about helping people heal their trauma around money?
Of course, it's a crazy, story as most of us have, but I grew up with a father who'd been in the financial industry his whole career. So I was already kind of used to that language. But that was not at all. If you would have told me when I was like, 10 that I would be talking about money and creating content about money, I would have really laughed in your face. I have always been a performer. When I was in college, I started at the time it was the first National Student Film Festival, and I ran that for 5 years and ended up actually selling it to a Hollywood producer. And after that, I was like, I have this like weird mixed bag of skills. What do I do? So I went back and got an MBA, and my dad at the time was running a small firm, and he's like, I'm kind of bored. Like, do you want to see if we could work together? And I was like, "Yeah, okay, why not?" So, from day 1, we were working with people who had massive estates. I lived in Los Angeles for many, many years, and what I was seeing was people who had a lot of money and my MBA cohorts who knew nothing about personal finance. I was seeing the same patterns that people have around money, their fears, their emotions, where they get stuck. And so I was like, this is really interesting. I didn't have a language for it really. But I started to do what I love, which was speaking and writing and talking about money, and became a certified financial planner, worked with women entrepreneurs. And really, it was around, uh, gosh, I would say 10, 12 years ago,
Mhm.
I started to notice like, oh, I'm going to help people with their money and they're having all these emotions that come up and it's not actually about the money. And then I started saying like, wow, I'm actually having the same things happen to me and I'm a money expert. Like there's something going on here. And so I started a podcast in 2015 that I just ended up selling this year. And that was really my time of like developing kind of my own language around money, and specifically for women, it was just like, okay, we just need to rebrand this because money is emotion first. It is
Mhm.
numbers way down the line. And so what I really specialize is kind of women and in kind of that midlife period, and also the role that like perimenopause and menopause plays into our money and how that shifts things. And so there's something that I created, kind of branded, called the emotional economy, which is all of us have our own emotional economy, right? About how we interact with money and the things that trigger us and the things that don't, the things that bring us shame and our stories. And there's so much going on underneath the surface that no one is really out there with expertise talking about. So
Mhm.
I blend these kind of weird things together, storytelling, trauma, expertise, as well as with the actual, numbers. to help people really get to a place of finding some sort of peace and ease
Mm.
around money.
You mentioned women and that you work specifically with women. Do you notice a big difference between the way women handle money and the way men handle money?
Actually, there's not a huge difference. I would say for women, if we look at the way trauma works around money, it is also generational. So if we look back to our grandmas and our great grandmas and we
Mhm.
go back that line and we think about how they did not have access to money, right? They couldn't get loans, they couldn't open businesses without a man, they couldn't even get a credit card till the 70s. So all of that trauma is in all of our
Mm.
bloodlines. So I think that just inherently makes us a little bit different. And then we have the bodily shifts that go on. Even in our years where we're, getting our periods, right? We still have these hormonal transitions that happen every single month. And these change our nervous system and it also changes our dopamine, our serotonin,
Mhm.
all of our neurotransmitters. And all of that impacts how we spend and save our money. And so I think from that aspect, women are different. But if we look at shame is kind of the number one thing that we
Mhm.
all share in common, all genders. But men, they have a little bit of a harder time kind of getting to that place where they're like, okay, yeah, this actually is shame around money. But there's a lot going on under the surface for all of us.
Yeah, I had never thought about the hormonal impact of our relationship with money, but even as you were saying that, I was thinking to myself, throughout the month, the way that I spend money is very different. And like right before my period, I am all about luxury, feeling good, whatever it is. So it's if I'm feeling lazy and I don't want to cook, I'm going to order in food, things like that. But that is not ever taking into consideration the financial implications there. It's all about the way it makes me feel. But men don't really go through that in the same way because they're the same every day.
Yeah, I know. Imagine.
Oh, wouldn't that be? I know. I'm like, what would I be like? I don't even know who I would be.
But you bring up a really good point, and that's something powerful. I think that when we talk about like traditional personal finance, that is never factored into the equation.
Right.
And it makes a huge impact because if we're trying to get to a certain goal around our money, whatever that is, if it's pay off debt or buy a new house or start a business or retire early, whatever, we have to factor in that emotional piece because
Hmm.
that is going to change, right? And so if we can build like a system around those times where when you need to spend more, right? And you need to just order out, that is already like kind of built in the equation,
Mm.
right? And so when we can think about it from that perspective, I think that we can do away with a lot of shame or a lot of whatever that word is for you. But for a lot of people, it's like, oh, I should know better. I should be better at this. Like, I can't believe I made that choice. And so we just end up, we kind of go in like a hamster wheel with our
Mhm.
thoughts and feelings around money. And it's all internal. So we just kind of walk around feeling, really crappy about ourselves when it's very unnecessary.
Right. Well, obviously, we've used the word trauma a couple times, and that's such a buzzword in our society these days. But you say money trauma is not only real, but it's universal, that it's just across the board. What were some of the things that you were immediately recognizing when you started working with people around that issue? And then what made you name it money trauma?
Trauma is just it's really we can just simplify it, right? It's just a fancy word for like ickiness, right? Just icky feelings, icky thoughts. And for a lot of us, that comes from how we were raised, right?
Mm.
Even in really good situations, because our parents weren't taught about money. They certainly weren't taught about feelings, right? So they didn't
Right.
know what they were doing either. But there's a scientific study that says by age 7, our money behaviors and personality is pretty set, right? So
7?
7. So
Wow.
between 0 and 7, we're picking up all these cues about money, about shame, about belief systems, about all of these
Mhm.
things. And they're just sort of imprinted into our, subconscious and our nervous system. And so as adults, we're out here. I often say we're like 7-year-olds driving a financial bus in like an adult body. And we're just kind of like running into each other because we don't know how to kind of unpack that. So a lot of it comes from childhood, but
Mhm.
it could also be really simple things. Like we tend to think money trauma is like, I don't know, maybe you lost your house or you lost your job or like these big things. But it could also be specifically when we're talking about money, like maybe you forgot to pay a bill once
Mhm.
and then suddenly your credit score dipped. And that little kind of nuanced bit that no one else knew made you feel like, okay, I'm terrible with money. So
Mm.
every time you go to look at like your banking app, you have this sort of somatic, this like body experience where you just freak out. And you're like, why is this happening? Right. And it's just our nervous system has kind of stored these moments around money. And so anytime we interact with it, we just freak out. There's also a lot of trauma in relationships around
Mhm.
money, and, that's something as well. There is some, severe financial abuse and trauma that happens in relationships, but again, it could also be very nuanced. It could be that you feel, um maybe you feel guilty for the salary you make and your partner doesn't make as much. And that almost creates a sense of trauma because every time you have to have a conversation about money or you have to make a buying decision, it brings up all of these stories and belief systems. So there's a lot of ways that this idea of trauma shows up, but really, I think the best way to notice it is just any way that you're interacting with money, if you
Mhm.
feel like your palms sweaty or like your heart's racing or your shoulders are getting stiff, like that's a clue that something is going on here. There's some sort of story or some trauma kind of locked here. And so you can use that as the place to just go, okay, what is this about? Is this
Yeah.
true? Is this a lie? What do I need to think about in this moment?
It's interesting because as I was just learning about your work and the book, I was thinking, this is the first money book that I have ever, or just any sort of like conversation around money in general, too, that I have ever witnessed that doesn't start with actual numbers. Like, that is typically how we think about money, right? And you start to think budgets and the truth for me is my brain immediately shuts down when those things get brought into the picture because I'm not a math girl, like that has never been my thing. But as you're talking about trauma, I was thinking this is the way I've healed every other part of my life. And it's really interesting that I've never thought about it in relation to money. We start with like the root causes, and that's what we're talking about a lot on this podcast. So I'm curious, in your work, what was the reframe like when you were like, "Wait a second, we don't need to start with budgets. We don't need to start with money or numbers. We need to start with, like, what is the root?" How did that look?
I think it actually was, I mean, for me and also for the people I was working with, like a very freeing experience. And a lot of people, before I had like a language around this, a lot of people that I would work with where we would sit down and like the first question I would ask is, tell me how you feel about money. And
Mhm.
they would always look at me a little strange, like, what do you mean? How do I feel about it? I'm like, really? How do you just tell me the first word that comes to your mind? And whatever that was, I would just continue to dig a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper until we got to some sort of like actual foundational meaning. Oh, you're always nervous about money because your parents always fought about money. And even though there was money, I mean, whatever, like there's
Sure,
for all of
yeah.
us, there's like a different variation of this. Okay, so now you are bringing that into your current relationship with money. Like, let's examine that. And so it was really about going through this process of helping people kind of uncover some of these things and saying, "Okay, well let's try to rewrite this a little bit. Like what do we want this to look like going
Mhm.
forward?" And so we would go through this process and we would bring up numbers like way down the line. And I think for people there was just for me and for the people I was sitting across, there was just these aha moments of like, "Oh, okay, wait. There's something more to this than just, credit card debt, right? Or
Mhm.
my credit score isn't where I want it to be. And I love that process because it's like an awakening, just like you're saying, where people are like, "Oh, I've never thought about money this way. I never thought there was could be like a therapeutic
Mhm.
experience around it that could lead to a place where, yeah, I feel a lot freer or I feel a sense of, okay, wait a minute. I'm not bad with money. Like I can actually do this thing." And so that's just the goal, is to try and get people to a place of empowerment. And I just have developed over the years, like all of these tools and games and, little like reset strategies to kind of throw at people just to help us interrupt the nervous system. Because as I say, like the nervous system fires before the budgeting brain fires. So if your nervous system is always anxious and nervous around money, it doesn't matter what we do with the numbers, it's not going to sink in.
Mhm,
You're going to end up calling me back in 2, 3 months and being like, this doesn't work.
mhm,
And so I feel like the financial industry has been traditionally male, right? And they charge a fair amount of money for people to work with them. And it doesn't usually lend the results that people want. And so it just keeps them in a cycle of feeling really terrible about money.
mhm. I'm dying that we talked about your astrology at the beginning because I'm like, tell me you're a Cancer sun and a Pisces moon without telling me based on your work because you're not just looking at the facts. You're like, what does that make you feel? Which is exactly how I would approach anything. Like, you want to find the feelings behind it.
And it catches people off guard, but it's
Yes.
really fun because when people start opening up and sharing like, "Oh, this experience and this story and this and oh my gosh, I didn't," and when they start noticing like, "Oh, every time I, grab my phone to look at my banking app, like I literally can feel my heart, racing.
Right.
Like I'm literally going to have to like run out of the room."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, well, let's set up some boundaries around that." People are like, "Well, what do you mean boundaries?" I'm like, "Do you know that we could say on every Sunday for 1 minute, you're gonna look at your banking app, and when a minute is up, you're gonna put your phone away." And they're like, "What? I can do that?" "Of
You're
course you
like, you
can.
can
Of
do whatever
course you
you want.
can."
Yeah.
So it's helping people create a system around
Mhm.
money that actually moves you to a place where you almost don't even have to think about it,
Mhm.
because the numbers is happening in the background, but more importantly, we're dealing with all of the emotional stuff, so we can make sure the numbers are doing what we want them to do. And it's certainly
Right.
not perfection. Like I tell people, like, if you get this right like 60 or 70% of the
Right.
time, beautiful.
Yeah, but isn't that every healing modality? We don't do it perfectly, but I love too the part you said about, wait, I can do that. Like, we've created all these rules in our world that we live by, and we don't really ask the question of why is that the rule though? Or why is that the way that we've structured this? And I really hear a lot of that in your work is you're just asking the whys.
I am, and I'm always trying to figure out, because money is this ginormous taboo topic,
Yeah.
and it feels very solo, right? Because you feel like what you're experiencing around money, there's no way anyone else is experiencing that. And there's also no way you're going to go talk to anyone else around that.
Mhm.
And so what I do is come in and I'm like, wait a minute. A, there are no original mistakes. I can tell you that if we lined 100 of us up, we have
Mhm.
all made basically the same mistake, different variations, different numbers. So there's nothing original.
Right.
And 2, if we actually started talking about it, like the way we're talking about it here, it it helps us, get to a place where it's not so scary. So, one of the things that I do is, I actually create these, baking workshops because I love to bake.
Baking?
Baking, yes, and
Okay.
we bake, and while we're baking, we talk about money, right? I infuse in it language because baking is emotional. A lot of people feel like they can't do it. A lot
Mhm.
of people feel like they can do it. But when you've baked something, like you feel really proud of yourself.
Mhm.
And so, what I do through the whole process is help women kind of expose parts of themselves around money that they didn't think were accessible. We talk about identity, we talk about what
Mhm.
we really want, we talk about enoughness, we talk about all of these things that actually have nothing to do with numbers, but have everything to do with numbers. And so I use that as like an experience to kind of open up the brain and the nervous system so that when we get to that numbers piece, it actually is, we have something we can stick to.
You just mentioned the word identities, and it pinged something for me because I wanna break that down a little bit. I feel like a lot of people might be listening thinking, yeah, I'm alright with money or just not really connecting to their own relationship with money specifically, and so I like to give them a little bit of a breakdown of, like, some of the ways this might look, which I think the identities piece of your work could be a really good place to do that. So can you talk a little bit about the different identities you see in relation to I think specifically women was what mostly you were talking about, in relation to money?
We all have, we can call it an identity, we can call it a personality, a
Mhm.
behavior system, whatever it is around money, right? And there's all sorts of different names, but basically we have somebody who is always anxious, nervous around money, right? Who this their go-to no matter what. It could be good news, it could be bad news.
Mhm.
Their body's immediately going to go to an anxious state, right? So we have that person. We have somebody else who is just kind of like gonna go for everything, right? Is gonna like hit for the fences. This is who I am. Who is always gonna go for the big and kind of gets lost in the details, that type of
Okay.
person. Then we have the reverse of that, right? The person who is so into the microscopic details that they can't see the forest, right? Can't see the
Oh,
forest
okay,
through the
yeah.
trees. And then we have also, each one of us is more predominantly either a spender or saver.
Mhm.
That's just and there isn't a better or worse. There's just knowing kind of who you are. So
Okay.
I think understanding like, am I somebody who's always nervous around money? Am I somebody who is, locked in the details or someone who kind of sees a big vision? And then am I more a spender or a saver? And so when we know those different pieces, then we can get in there and figure out, okay, what is a system that is going to work best for you?
Mhm.
So it's going to play to your strengths. We also, have some support coming on the things that you're maybe not so strong on. And that is going to help you in this place around your emotions, not feel like you're triggered all of the time. So there's that part of identity, but there's also a part where a lot of us have, and I was guilty of this myself, we have associated money with who we are as a human.
Mhm.
And so I like to tell people like money is not a personality trait. Like I
Right.
wouldn't walk around and say, you have brown hair and you're wearing a gray sweatshirt and you have brown eyes. I think and you're also money, like, I wouldn't use
Yeah.
that, right? And so we, though, have created a society and a system where we've labeled that,
It's so true.
and so a lot of times we're stuck because of money. We're either not making a career decision because of money tied to our identity, or we're making one maybe we shouldn't because of our identity around money, even in relationships. So, really, I think thinking about what role does money currently play
Mhm.
in you, who you are as a human, and what role do you want it to play? And can we separate who you are as human from whatever is in your bank account? That's
Oh,
really important because that if we
yeah.
can get a gap there, then we can really work on the emotional piece where no matter what happens, ups, downs, backwards, forwards, we're not tied to that being how we show up in the world.
Mhm. Well, it's not tied to your worth, which is it's so interesting that you bring this up because we've talked about this a lot on the podcast that since the pandemic specifically, because, like for me in my day-to-day job, the world completely shut down. And so I didn't have a job for almost felt like almost 2 years, and that was a long time. Money being a big piece of that time, that was really stressful for a lot of people, and I think a lot of people would still resonate with that. Like, I don't feel like we fully have found our footing again since the pandemic. But so much of the work I personally have had to do around that was about not attaching the money piece to who I am as a person. And I wasn't even thinking about the fact that I've been doing that until you just worded it in the way of like, we describe it as a personality trait. Like, what is that actually? I've never thought about that until you said it.
It's because we're in this, even in the US, like a hyper media focused
Mhm.
world too, right? Where the the vision around who has money, who doesn't is in front of our face all
Yeah.
day, every day. And it's, worse and worse with social media because that is just, over sort of glamorized. And
Sure.
then anything that we read, TV we watch, it all plays into the scarcity factor around money. And so it's really easy to feel like if you think the amount of money in your bank account, savings account, retirement, whatever, is not where you think it should be, or is
Mhm.
not equivalent to, let's say, a coworker or a friend or a partner or your spouse, it's really easy to internalize that as you did something wrong. Like,
Mhm.
you're clearly not as good of a human as that other person. And so then it starts to become your identity. It starts to become how you move in the world, right? And you start to operate from a different place. And so it's hard work. Like, I'm not gonna lie. I'm an expert at it, and it's gonna be my lifelong struggle for
Sure.
sure. I grew up in a family where status was, really important. So, it's taken me a long time to break off. It doesn't matter what car I drive, it doesn't matter what
Mhm.
house I live in, it doesn't matter what brand of pants I'm wearing, like, none of that matters who I am as a human, right?
Mhm.
And so that just does it takes a lot of work in, like, really cementing who you are and, like, who you are at the core if all of it was taken away.
Right.
And thinking about it from that perspective. And,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, it's certainly not like a weekend project, but
Right. It's one day at a time kinda thing.
yeah. But I guess I have a little bit of a naive slash big vision.
Okay.
That, like, especially if we as women could do some of this work, I
Mhm.
think that, we would show up even more powerful. We would show up, even bigger in our careers, in our families, because
Mhm.
we're not tied up in this kind of old belief system around money.
Mhm. Well, you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast perimenopause, menopause, and that just made me think of midlife. So this is maybe a two-part question. I want to talk about specifically the menopause piece and what that would change with our relationship with money. But also, I think a lot of people equate midlife to starting over in some capacity. Like a lot of people go through changes. I'm 43. So, I'm going through that phase of life where I think you start to ask yourself, is this what I want to be doing for the rest of my life? Am I on the right path? Is this my purpose? All of those things. But starting over sounds really scary too. So, can you talk a little bit about how we make those decisions, not completely disregarding money, obviously, like factoring that in, but also not letting it rule the decisions that we make for ourselves?
Yeah, and I'm in my 40s too, so I can really relate to this that, I think 40s are one of the biggest, not only sort of life transition decades in our lives, but also for most women, I see it being one of the most expensive
Mm.
decades in our lives. Like if we look at, perimenopause and menopause and all of that, we just have a lot of things, right? Supplements,
Oh, yeah.
pills, acupuncture, like all of this stuff that we're
All the
trying
things.
just to feel human, buying
Right.
pillows, I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, and it's like, I don't care what it costs. Like I need sleep or I need to
Yes.
function as a human and I
Yes.
need a brain and I need, all of those sorts of things. So it becomes really expensive. But also, I would say that most women, probably 99% that I've worked with in the 40 to 50 range and some a little beyond, have a great impulse of wanting to blow up their life.
Oh,
Like,
okay. So that's
just
not just
wanting
me.
no, no, you're not alone, of just wanting to,
Ew.
like, implode everything, and I think
Yeah.
that is part of it is biochemical, it is our bodies either going through or gearing up to go through one of the biggest
Mhm.
transitions in our lives, right? When we go through perimenopause into menopause, absolutely everything biochemically about us changes,
Mhm.
and so we're just starting to have really a language around that, but it would make sense then if all of that is changing that our money, our identity, how we view money, how we spend money, how we save money, that all of that shifts as well. So,
Right.
you're not alone. Um, I probably on a weekly basis say like, I just want to like get in my car and I
Yep.
just want to drive away. Like the fantasy is super real. So I think what you have to, in the moments where you're not in that space, it's really important to root into. I ask a lot of women, like, I need you to write down or think about whatever way you work best. What does enough look like for you?
Mm,
What is that? I want you to come up with a number. I want you to come up with a feeling. I want you to come up with where you're living, what you're doing. I want you to have such a crystal clear picture of what enough is so that if you're not there, we can create it, right? But when you do get there, you're going to know, okay, I'm in this space.
mhm.
So a lot of us feel like we just don't have enough, right? We don't have enough money. No, we don't have enough time. We don't have enough this. We don't, and so we live in this place of lack. And I think that creates even more of the impulse of like, F it, I'm just going to blow
Right,
everything up, right?
right.
And so having that written out is usually pretty powerful
Okay.
of this is my ideal. This is what like if I could capture it, this is what it would be. And so then thinking, okay, which pieces of this are not aligned? Is it my career? Is it my relationship? Do I need to move? Do I need to think about moving? Do I want to retire? Do I want to, you know, change my career up? Like all of these things. Then we kind of bring the money piece in and go, okay, where's the money at and how do we get it to support this vision? But we've got to have like the roadmap of what
Mhm.
it looks like first, because I want every woman in particular to get to a place where they feel like they're living in that version of enough.
Yeah.
So it's honoring, during this big transition, it's honoring that your body's going through this. You're going to have moments where you really want to spend money. Brilliant. I tell women to create, I don't care what you want to call it, um, some people call it my manic spending. Some people call it my menopause moment. Some people call it my brain fog account. Create a,
Brain
s-
fog.
a savings account or
Okay,
another checking account.
okay.
Put a certain amount of money in that every month. And when you're in those moments of like, I just need to spend money or
Yeah,
I just need, great. You already have money set apart. Just go and grab it from that account. No shame, no guilt, right?
that is
Like
such a
build
good idea.
in
Yeah.
these things that make you feel bad about money, like build these into your system around money
Mhm,
so we can get rid of a lot of that shame. But it really knowing like what is it that I really want? Like what is going to give me that feeling? And maybe you
mhm,
might not exactly know, and that's okay. Like that's part of the experience.
mhm.
But the more you can see it, feel it, sensory experience around it, the easier it's going to be like, okay, which parts are missing? Let's bring the money in
Yeah.
to just make that work.
Well, I think what you're saying is huge because what I'm hearing is just to be conscious of it and to plan for it instead of unconsciously moving through those emotions and those feelings and then feeling shame later. And that's what happens to me. It's kind of what I was saying at the beginning of the podcast. I'll need my creatures of comfort type things during certain times of the month. And that is changing as I go through different phases and get older and things like that. But because I'm not exactly planning for those times, then later I'm like, "Oh, why did you do that?" Or you know what I mean? Like, there's a way to turn on yourself with it. Whereas what you're saying is, no, prepare for those moments. So then when you're doing it, it's not gonna send you into shame because you prepared for it.
Or if you notice, like, if you notice every month
Mhm.
around my period, I want to spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Like, let's create an account or system or something where it is all set up to hold that for you.
Mhm.
So you don't even have to worry about that every month. That time of month comes, you already know you can go out and you can,
Right.
get your takeout and you can go
Yeah.
get your latte and you can go get your massage because that is already factored into the equation. And so when we do that, it's like, oh, I don't have to feel guilty about this. Like,
Right.
I've literally created my system to,
Right.
support me in these moments. And that just totally changes, I think, how you show up in the world too, because you don't have to go through that,
Mhm.
shame and blame, but allowing yourself to, like, I might have to blow up my life. And that might also be okay. Like, I think also holding that truth, because I don't want people to feel so calculated.
Mm.
I want you to leave room for this is a messy, wild, weird time. And yeah, you might make some decisions like that. And you can also move through those without shame or guilt,
Mm.
right? So you can hold those too. and you're gonna be fine, I promise.
Yeah. Well, I feel like your story, and we didn't fully touch on this at the beginning, but there were so many moments in your life leading up to this moment where you have started over. I mean, I know you mentioned to me selling your podcast, and then you did mention when you were much younger selling that festival. So then there's the moment after that. And in those cases, obviously, you're making a decision that was probably in your best interest. But as I touched on with the pandemic and stuff, a lot of us did feel this like starting over energy. And we can so easily attach shame to that, I think, especially as you get older. Do you have anything with those kind of mentalities that you would recommend to listeners about if you find yourself in a place of starting over? How do you not attach to, oh my gosh, I messed everything up. I didn't do this right. Like everyone else has it figured out, like things like that.
Well, I went through a divorce in my early 30s where I lost literally everything. I had my car and a suitcase to my name.
Wow.
So, I know starting over from all different sides of the coin. I think one of the most powerful things you can do, I have an exercise called financial forgiveness. It
Mhm.
seems very simplistic, but it's really powerful. It's setting your phone timer for 15 minutes without judging yourself. I want you to write down everything that you wish you would have done, that you
Mm,
think you should have done, that you feel guilty about, that you feel shame about. I just want you to dump it on a piece of paper. No one is going to see this but you. So be really honest with yourself. Then I want you to step away when that 15 minutes is up. Come back 24 hours later, read over the piece of paper. You're going to see some things, usually see some patterns emerge in that from a different perspective when your nervous system is calm. And then I need you to get rid of it, burn it, shred it, throw it away, right? Seems very simple, but there is a very strong brain, nervous system, money connection around getting these things out of your body, of your brain
mhm,
onto paper, and then getting rid of them. It doesn't erase them, of course, but what it tells your brain and your nervous system is, hey, those things don't have to keep us stuck
mm.
anymore. We can start over. Worked with, I've been doing this for over 20 years. Almost everyone I've worked with has had a starting over moment. Most people don't talk about it. And so I just want you to know that you can do it, right? It goes back to the same place, the same tools. What do we want? What is this vision of enoughness? Okay, where's the money at? How do we get it to come along with this? At the same time, we're doing this financial forgiveness thing, right? We're getting rid of it, getting rid of it, getting rid of it. So it's the same process that you just kind of keep moving through.
Well, the book is called Unraveling Your Relationship with Money, and I love anything related to diving into the feelings behind why we do what we do, so I'm very excited about this. If you had to say, what is the one thing that you would want readers to walk away learning about money from your book, what would it be?
We've said it many times, but money is emotional. It's not numbers. So stop playing in the numbers so much and get in the emotions. And that's where you're going to see things change.
Oof. And my listeners are like, "Oh god, this is so Kelly." It's a whole conversation. I 100% know everyone listening is like, "This is the best guest for her," because it's all about emotions, right? It's why we do everything we do. So I'm so grateful for this conversation, Shauna. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.